I'll back it up to say when the first thing you need to understand when you're trying to sell a business is you need the buyer to feel confident that this is a business that they can buy and successfully operate and grow. And so if you are the secret sauce in your business, then you need to figure out a way to make it not so. So you either need to systemize things or see how you can separate yourself from the business.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Humans of Flippa. So today I'm joined by Kevin Fernando, who is the owner of the YouTube channel Solopreneur and the newsletter solopreneurtools.io. Now these are content-based businesses, but before that, Kevin actually owned and exited 2 e-commerce businesses. So we're going to get into a little bit about how he ended up choosing the business models that he did. And I think this is a good listen for those who are wondering what business models to either build or buy themselves, and from the perspective of a solopreneur. So with that said, let's get into the show. Kevin, how you doing, man? Welcome to the show.
Doing well, Nick. Happy to share here and to be chatting with you today and share a bit about all my experiences.
Yes. Well, I gave kind of an intro there, but can you tell me a little bit more about just how you started out and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, so I'm a bit of an old dog on the internet. I've been running online businesses for about 12 years. I really cut my teeth when I was running an e-learning agency for about 6 years, and that used to be a lot harder than it is now with all the AI tools and animation tools out there. But I ran an e-learning agency for about 6 years. I've had multiple e-commerce stores, which I'm happy to dive into, and some of my experiences selling 2 of them on Flippa. I've tried my hand at some apps. I've had some service businesses, I'm skipping a lot here. And most recently, I run a YouTube channel and have some offerings around that too. So it's been I'm pretty poly enthusiastic. I've been around in a lot of different types of business models, and so I'm happy to share whatever insights I can.
Yeah. So I think one question that especially new buyers will ask themselves is, what kind of business should I buy? Or anybody who's looking to build, what kind of business should I build? Should I go with an agency, a service-based business? Should I go for e-commerce or app or YouTube? So how should one, now that you've gone through all of these different business models, how do you think somebody should think about what kind of business model to choose, and how did you ultimately choose YouTube?
Yeah, I mean, I could answer this question in so many ways, right? I think from a philosophical standpoint, the whole Japanese ikigai thing, you probably see it a lot, where it's like the intersection between what you're good at, what you can sell, what you're passionate about. And so I think that at a core, and I'm happy to dive into how I didn't do that so well when I sold one of my businesses. But, I think that's one. I think at the end of the day, you need to look within yourself and say, what do you like and what are you good at, and what does the market actually want? Because there's a lot of stuff you're good at and you like that nobody wants. I'm sorry. That's just right. There's an element of that. But outside of that, I think what any serial entrepreneur will tell you is you almost don't know what's gonna work. So I think everybody goes out with the intention of, everyone who starts a business intends on it succeeding. No one intends on it not succeeding, right? So I think there's an element of, can you fail fast? Can you test something cheap and cheerful? And again, I'm happy to dive into one of the e-commerce stores I started and how I did that before I pivoted it. But I think it's like, can you test that in a way that doesn't break the bank and take you a year to do it? So I think there's an element of trying to prove it out quickly in the market. I think there's an element of what you're into, and then I think there's an element of just right time. There's a time and place where sometimes things are possible now that weren't possible before, and the internet moves so quickly. So all things being considered, I think that you gotta just look at the market factors and say, hey, like, what's blowing up, what's slowing down, and if you're gonna swim against the tide when something's slowing down, no matter how good you are, you will fail. So I think that's a mistake I've made a few times, and so that's something a lot of entrepreneurs don't think about. And then lastly, from a very practical standpoint, I touched on it with what you're good at, but if you don't like talking to people, then maybe don't get into a business where the primary modality is talking to people. If you don't like being on camera, if you don't like, dealing with physical goods, or so on and so forth, right? So I think it's also an understanding of self, and when starting a business. And I think when buying a business, I think I'm happy to talk about that today. I think there are a lot of considerations that go into buying a business that are on top of everything I just talked about.
Yeah. Let's talk about that actually before we get into the business that you built and sold. What is your perspective on, for buying a business? Does that differ? I know you just talked about that 3-circle Venn diagram. Knowing what you know now, how would you go about thinking about buying a business?
Yeah, I think, I think buying a business is obviously the on the other side of that coin is selling a business, right? But I think when you're a buyer of a business, what you're trying to do is you're trying to skip that part of product market fit, to use business school terminology, right? Like, you're trying to buy a proven system. It's the same reason people buy franchises, right? People buy a McDonald's or this or something franchise because the original founder has already done the hard work of saying, yeah, this works. This is how you sell it. This is operationally what it is. This is how you promote it. And yeah, people want it and they keep coming back. You're buying the business in a box, right? And, as an entrepreneur, the first business you start, you might strike gold, but anyone who's been a serial entrepreneur, often it doesn't work like that. And Nick, I know we talked off camera about your candle business and, and some of the ups and downs there. So, anyone who's run multiple businesses would know. But, so basically I think that, the idea here is, you're buying a system, and so you're looking to shortcut that. I don't want to be the guy who tries 5 businesses and fails. I'd rather just pay to get the proven system now. And so knowing that you're looking for that, then that's, I think, what you have to look for. It's like, hey, what does their acquisition channels look like? How are they getting traffic? Is it sustainable? What do the metrics look like, right? Is it costing $5 to sell something that's $2? Right? Like, are the numbers, what are the growth metrics like? Then, what is the industry like? Is it going up or down, right? Is this a good or a bad industry or flat? Then, and then finally, like, what does that operation look like, right? If you want to buy a business where, and what degree do you want to be involved in? Are you trying to buy a basically passive income business where you're trying to put in 2 or 4 hours a week? Or are you trying to buy something that's, you're going to be much more involved in? It's more of a lifestyle business. Many different considerations, right? Are you buying something to complement something you already have? And, it's the missing piece in your puzzle. So I think there's a lot of I think everyone's reason would be different. But I think the average person, though, the reason they're buying a business is because they're buying something proven as opposed to starting something themselves. And
Yeah. And now from the seller's perspective, so you have built and successfully sold an e-commerce business. Can you tell me a little bit more about just that business, how you got into it, how you decided to build it, and your experience with selling it?
Yeah, so I sold two. Sold two, and Flippa was involved in that, in both of those processes. And one of them, and this is the short version, right? One of them is a simpler one. So I was hanging out with some friends, and I saw that they were running this subscription box business for men. They were watches. So this was like 5-6 years ago when subscription boxes were a thing. I think they're still a thing, but they were blowing up. And so basically there was subscription box business. It was a monthly watch. You get a watch every month. And there were like 3 of them for men. And I'm like, okay, well, where's the one for women? And there wasn't one. And so I'm like, well, women make up about 50% of the population. And I looked up the global sales for watches for women, and it obviously was in the billions. And I'm like, well, there's a market here. Women buy watches. They're half the population. Why don't I make this thing? And that was the wrong idea, because I'll just tell you, I know nothing about women's jewelry, and I'm not really interested in it, to be very honest, or passionate about it. So, but I started the store, and it was a lot of logistical work too, because I was shipping these boxes individually. I had to source all of these watches from overseas, and I was packaging them individually. My wife would be helping me, and we'd be sending it. And the margins were low because
to the customers, you'd be shipping them
individually, and I had to do branding. I was working with influencers. It was a lot of operational work for a relatively, 30% margin product or so. And that is the nightmare of it, right? And the other problem is you're dealing with individual people's tastes and whatnot. So thankfully, I was growing the business, right? And it was growing month after month, but I was pulling my hair out doing it. And so thankfully I found somebody on Flippa who was more inclined to run that kind of business and was excited by it, because at the end of the day, she would have always brought more passion to this business than I would have. And so I'm glad that her and I were able to transition that. So that was a good experience in terms of selling it. It was a good learning experience for what not to start. Don't do anything, because it's the only time I've ever done something purely for the economic reason. But other than that, so it's the other thing I alluded to, where I'll give you the short version. I was selling Google VR glasses. So long story short, there was this product called Google Cardboard. And Google Cardboard is like these VR glasses, and it says Celine Dion, and I'll get to that part of the story in a minute. But basically, you put your phone inside these VR glasses, and they're pretty cool. They're the cheapest VR you can get. And Google made this as an experiment. And one day I'm working at this agency and I see somebody has one of these. I'm like, hey, can I get one? They're like, no, you can't buy them. They're only promotional items that Google made and gave to a few people, kind of thing. But long story short, I got that, I started looking into this. I noticed that there was an opportunity. I'm from Toronto, Canada. No one was selling them in Canada. And so I found a supplier who would make this for me, because Google's specs were all public domain. Anyone could make it. So I started this e-commerce store selling these VR glasses. And, I managed to rank first page on Google for a number of terms. And, I had some great ad campaigns. And so it was starting to take off. But once again, with the e-commerce element, there's a shipping component here where you're selling off one-off pieces. But even before I created the e-commerce store, I actually started using something like Craigslist and meeting people one-on-one and selling them the product. In fact, before I even ordered the product from China, that day I saw the glasses and she told me I couldn't get it. I went on something called Kijiji, which it used to be, I think eBay bought it in the States, but it's still around in Canada, but it's like Craigslist. And I put it on there, hey, do you want to buy these? $20. I didn't even have the thing. And within an hour, I kid you not, I got 2 people, messaging me, yeah, I want one.
That's
and
awesome.
I'm like, okay. Yeah. I'm like, okay, well.
Talk about validating an idea. That's awesome.
Yeah, man. And that's where I was saying, where like you want to test the market, right? Because then I went off and got 100 pieces. And then I was doing that and I was like, man, this is a low margin thing again, where I'm like, I got to sell high volumes. But then eventually, this is what, listening to the market, what I was talking about, people start coming to me and saying, hey, listen, brands would come to me and say, hey, can you do this for me for my trade show? I want to do a branded one. And I'm like, and the answer is always, yes, I can do this. And so, I went back to my partner in Asia and then just figured out the whole process. And I pivoted my business from doing one-off e-commerce to B2B e-commerce. So like Celine Dion was one of my clients and this is hers. And I had the government of Canada and like Heineken and so many different brands. But, and then it was drop shipping too. So I went from e-commerce to drop shipping. And I was drop shipping and it was one of those, when you're doing 20, 30, 40K deals, drop shipping, where, you're paying your vendor up front.
Because it's B2B drop shipping.
Yeah, too. It's B2B and it's And it's custom. Like if you make a single mistake, they're not going to pay you.
Oh,
They're like, oh, you got
yeah.
my logo wrong. There's supposed to be a comma here. And so it was hairy and it was stressful, but I still preferred it way. And, I was making way more money. I wasn't handling any products directly. And the number of customer, I was only dealing with 2 or 3 customers a month instead of like 100 or more. And so it's very different, but eventually, I was starting I remember being in Portugal on my honeymoon, trying to save this deal. I'm running around trying to find Wi-Fi because it's like, well, what happened is instead of it being an e-commerce deal where you're checking out automatically, now it was a B2B sale. So you'd have to email me and I'd give you a quote and we'd go through the whole process and I'd make you a sample. But, I'm trying to find Wi-Fi to email someone back. And so, I think so. It got to the point where I just didn't like it from a lifestyle perspective. And, I also had the foresight to say, well, this is a one-off product. There's not really a sustainable business I can build off this product. I tried some AR, like augmented reality versions of this, but it didn't hit as much. And so that's when I realized that now's the time to divest from this. I think it's a timing thing too. So it didn't fit my lifestyle that I wanted, and I wanted to kind of get out of it. And so, I listed my store on Flippa, and I'm happy to dive into, Nick, all the learnings I had there because I wasn't ready to list it. Let me tell you, there's a lot of things I didn't know before I listed it.
Oh, you mean you were ready to sell, like you're ready to sell it to somebody, but you weren't ready to, like it wasn't, you weren't ready to package it for a sale.
Yeah, like
okay.
it was my, yeah. So I even though I told the other story first, this was actually the first one I sold.
Okay.
I told the other one first because it's simpler, but yeah. So that was when I learned, and Flippa kind of helped to educate me on the types of things you need to do as a seller in order to make things attractive.
Yeah, for sure. Before we get into that, what you said, 2 things about the watches business. One is that you didn't know much about the industry, or you didn't know anything about women's watches, and you weren't that passionate about it. I think those are 2 different considerations, because you'll have buyers who probably don't know, who maybe aren't experts at a certain niche or business model, like maybe it's a new buyer. So it's more of a skill thing. But then yes, the interest part. So like, let's say you're very passionate about a certain niche as a consumer. And so that might be how you decide what kind of business you want to get involved in. You might not have experience, particularly in e-commerce or inventory management, but I think there's I guess I say this to not deter people who don't have that experience running an e-commerce business from buying that, from thinking like, oh, I can't run a drop shipping business if I haven't owned one before. But yes, I think the interest in it is important in order to be consistent, to learn to be on that learning curve and learn what you need to in order to succeed at that business.
Yeah, you're 100% right, and I couldn't agree more. There are, as a buyer, of course, it'd be obviously the best situation if you're coming into an industry you know about. But
Sure.
Again, depending on the business model, I don't think it matters. Like, let's say if you were buying a lawn care e-commerce store. I don't think this is something where it's incredibly difficult to learn about lawn care, right? So I think you're spot on that it's a fair point to decouple the two, But definitely, I would say it's helpful if you know a bit about the industry,
Sure.
but absolutely not necessary, like you're saying. I think, right? For most industries, anybody can learn, and you can learn as you go, because most entrepreneurs learn as we go. So
Sure.
there's that. But I do think that I would highly recommend, unless you're the most disciplined person out there, and even then I wouldn't, because you won't be happy, that you have an interest in the subject matter, because someone else doing the equivalent idea who is passionate about it will do better than you, because it'll just show, right? They'll be willing to put in the extra hours because they're having fun and you're not.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Cool. So let's go back to what you were just saying about you didn't know how to package the business properly for a sale. So what are some things that you learned through the process of trying to sell your business? And like what ultimately helped you get across that finish line?
Yeah, so I think there are a few things, right? Often as a business owner and, as someone running this business by myself, a lot of the things that you need to do operationally are just in your head. So you just know the order of operations in your head. So one of the things is, I'll back it up to say when the first thing you need to understand when you're trying to sell a business is you need the buyer to feel confident that this is a business that they can buy and successfully operate and grow. And so if you are the secret sauce in your business, then you need to figure out a way to make it not so. So you either need to systemize things or see how you can separate yourself from the business. But the thing I learned is, so I think the first part is how do I synthesize the business operations? What are the key activities and deliverables and value adds that I need to document so that somebody understands the customer's journey? Okay, here's how I get customers. Here's the process of selling to the customers. Here's the delivery process. Here's the post-delivery process. So that's very clear, and you don't need to define every single step, but the core activities to deliver the business. Every business has those core deliverables that from the moment the sale started to when the product is delivered or service is delivered. So being able to document all of that is important. So I think that, and to be able to summarize that, to be able to articulate that in a clear pitch. So I think that's one of the things. Then we got to get into your traffic numbers and your financials, right? So data and metrics. So you need to know your numbers. So where is your traffic coming from? And whatever your sources are, whether it's ads, what do those numbers look like? If it's organic, what do those numbers look like? Are there some highlights for your traffic sources that you want to? So there's that element of it. And then on the financial side, of course, there's that's a whole world in itself. Of course, how do your revenues versus your expenses? What's your profit margin, right? Do you have what is your monthly revenue and then your gross revenue and then and so many things, right? And in terms of what are your fixed costs, what are your variable costs, what are your last 12 or 24 month performance? So all of those kinds of very basically your books need to be very cleaned up, and a lot of entrepreneurs, our books are kind of they're not really in a bookkeeping way when you're starting an e-commerce business, right? You just kind of have it all over the place, and maybe you have multiple credit cards. Yeah, it's not very disciplined. So yeah, just being able to, and I remember Flippa had some very, very helpful templates here to force that rigor. So that was helpful. And yeah, so I'd say those are the high level elements that you need to make sure. Like, you just have to put yourself in the buyer's shoes, right? What's going to make the buyer the most comfortable with your business, to think that they feel that they could buy this and succeed. It's like when you buy a McDonald's, most people assume that they're going to succeed because it's so systemized, right? And so you have to think to yourself, if I would, how could I make it seem like I'm selling a McDonald's, to use a simple analogy, right? Where the person really feels that this could work. And so like what I did when I was selling this business was I made all the introductions to the seller, like, hey, look, this is my partner, hopped on a call with both of them, made that introduction. I sent him a whole file with like sales interactions. Like, this is what the original conversation was. This is how I handled it. Right. So he had a whole swipe file of all of my email responses. He had all my templates. He had contacts, and and I offered him, hey, look, I'm going to stay on and help you on a consulting basis for 60 days post sale, which is huge, right? Nice. And those little things go into success, right? Because the last thing someone wants is like you just walk away. And so that's another component a lot of people don't think about is, it's almost like a warranty. Like, hey, look, like, I know it's impossible that I covered absolutely everything, and there's some edge cases that no one would think to document. I'm going to be reachable and I'm going to help you.
Yeah. Yeah. One question that I just thought about as you were mentioning this is, do you, or would you, knowing what you just described about how it should be set up at the time that you want to sell the business, would you start on day one building that business a little bit differently? Or let's say your cousin or a friend said, hey, I want to start this online business, knowing, and I want to eventually sell it. Would you tell them kind of these things about how to be organized from the onset? And if so, like what would you tell them?
It's a great question. I think and so firstly, I think there are certain business, like all businesses are not made equal. I think there are some businesses that are more sellable than others. Just the business model itself. And it's the same reason why, and the multiple you'll get is also, and that's another thing, right? So let's say you're doing 10,000 in monthly revenue, then someone's going to buy it for a multiple of that, right? So your annual revenue. So, and that multiple will depend on very, very many things, but some of it is how, some businesses are just inherently more scalable than others. So for example, if you're trying to sell your service business and, there's people involved, and not to say you can't, because there's a lot of successful service businesses you can buy, but just as a simple example, service business versus a software business, the software business, generally speaking, is going to be much easier to buy because it's something that is inherently able to be sold as opposed to a service business, right? And I'm actually, Nick, I know we talked about it. Like, I'd love to hear about, a YouTube channel, in something like where if you're the principal of your YouTube channel, I think that's a different type of business than if you started a newsletter, right? Where it's a faceless newsletter, or you started an e-commerce site. So the first, backing it out to your question, the first thing I would say to my cousin or someone is, hey, listen, the type of business you're starting, you should never start it with the idea of selling it in the end, because you never know if it's going to be successful. But all things being equal, there are some types of, like, what's your exit plan? Like, best case scenario, what's your exit strategy? Are you building a lifestyle business that you don't want to sell? Then cool. But if you're like, no, listen, I want to build this, grow it in 5 years and sell it, then I think once you determine that it is possible to be sold, or it's attractive to be sold, then exactly like you're saying, I would say, hey, like, keep your books clean. Try and organize, document your processes. So try and keep any of your processes, document whether you want to use something like Notion or Xtiles or any other product you want to use, or Evernote, or even just a notepad on your computer, or even Google Docs. It's free, right? Like, document your processes. Like I said, keep your books and your expenses in check, and and try to learn analytics, right? Learn analytics and learn how to be able to communicate what's working and what's not working, what channels, traffic sources are working. So if you're able to present some of this information, then and you better understand what is and isn't working, and the key levers there, the data around the key mechanisms, then that's always going to help, right? Like, at this stage, my conversion rate is this, but this is where it falls off, and so on. So yeah, I would just say document and keep your numbers clean. It's probably the summary.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go to now the business that you're running now, which is your YouTube channel. Can you tell me a little bit more about the channel itself, what the channel is about, and then just kind of your experience with running that business?
Yeah, for sure. So I started this channel, restarted it actually in 2020. Previously, I restarted on YouTube. Previously, I had a different type of channel, but this channel really is about helping entrepreneurs make more, spend less, and work less. And so I talk a lot about automation, and my audience is a lot of solopreneurs, and most, I would go so far as to say most internet entrepreneurs and small business entrepreneurs are usually now are solopreneurs. When I say solopreneur, you could have maybe just some freelancers you work with or something like that, but you're still largely the principal, and you run it's the one person band kind of thing. So in the industry, in the world we're in today, AI and automation and all of these things and so many software tools have made it more possible than ever to be the one person band. So on my channel, I show entrepreneurs the tools that they can use to accomplish this, to, like I said, make more. What are the growth tools they can use? Spend less. What are some tools they can use to get the most impact without spending as much as they used to, either on people or manual processes, and then work less, of course, because the holy grail for most online entrepreneurs is you don't want to, be working 12-hour days to make what you could at a regular job. Then you've just bought your own job, right? That what you've done is, right? Most people have the goal of having that work-life balance, that, the 4-hour work week kind of thing, that the mythical 4-hour work week kind of thing. So, how do you achieve that balance? And automation and AI can especially in 2024 and as we look into 2025, is more possible than ever before. So that's really the crux of the channel. And so I make a lot of tutorials and strategies, and even live things that I'm currently learning and growing in my business. And then I work with software companies that want to get their tool out to, they want to share it, to get more awareness on their tool, and then they think it can really help entrepreneurs. So I work with software companies, collaborate with them. And I also work with some of my audience to look into their systems and to see where we can make optimizations for them.
And are there any specific business models that you think are ideal for being a solopreneur or using these specific tools that you'll talk about? And are there any business models that are not as good for these tools?
Yeah, I think it's challenging, right? Because I think every model can be profitable, but I think if we're talking about it from the lens of selling a business, is that what we're talking about, from a lens of selling a business per se?
I think from the lens of, let's say I own a business, and how realistic is, and I want to become a solopreneur. Yeah. How realistic is it for me to say, go to your channel, sign up for your newsletter, and pretty much replace kind of, I don't know, the people that I have working for me, or some of the processes, or replace myself as the main full-time employee, as the owner? How realistic is it to use these tools for?
I think it's very, very realistic and more possible than ever. Like, I'll give you an example where it used to be the case where you would have to, hopping on live webinars, for example. Let's say you were doing a lot of one-on-one selling, and you were hopping on live webinars, or you're doing one-on-one sort of interactions like that. There's only so many hours in a day. But now there are tools where you can do instant live webinars, right? That they look live and they're instant. And there's tools like that where you can replicate yourself infinitely. There are avatar tools right now where, you could make a personalized, I made a video where I show how you could send out 1,000 personalized video messages with a few clicks. Right. And so that would have taken you like a month.
Yes.
If you were to do that. Right. So then, like I said, like there are so many tools that could make content for you now, like writing emails, writing blog posts. I have a tutorial on my channel where it's like 100% automated social media system. Like you literally just flip a switch and it'll start doing written content for any niche. So I think that, but at the end of the day, these things are just tools. So I think it wouldn't be realistic for anybody to be like, I want to make a business where I'm going to just flip a bunch of switches and make money on autopilot while, sleeping on the beach. That, I think that's the dream a lot of people sell. And it certainly is possible at some point in your business, if you've been doing this for a long time and maybe you have people helping you, or you've certain business models like you talked about. But for the vast majority of people, I think it's about getting more done with less rather than completely replacing yourself. But I will say that it's more competitive than it's ever been, but it's also more possible than it's ever been. Like just ChatGPT alone, you could just have a conversation with ChatGPT, be like, I'm interested in this. This is what I like doing. These are my interests. These are my experiences. What kind of business should I start? And ChatGPT will talk to you for days personal one-on-one consulting, right?
Right.
So I think it's more possible than ever, but I would never want to sell the dream that you can just flip a bunch of switches and anybody could make money online. But there are a lot of like business models we want to talk about. If you're selling digital products, we all know you do make it once. You could sell it an infinite number of times. And if you have the right funnel that's selling on autopilot for you, then of course that can make you a lot of money passively. But so can, let's say you start a school community, like a membership group, but that's a lot more active. You're involved with everyone in that community, but it could be making you a lot of money every month. So I think, there are a lot of tools, but they're just tools. And it still comes down to you as the practitioner.
I think from anybody listening to this is probably either a buyer or an interested buyer, potential buyer, or a business owner and potential seller. So I think there are two kinds of use cases that for both the buyer and the seller. So for the buyer, they're probably looking at businesses, and they might want to either scale a business using some of these tools, or to potentially increase profit margins by reducing the amount of spend on maybe like hiring contractors or talent in that way. So that's, I think, a use case. Then for the seller, the business owner side, I could imagine that being somebody who wants to maybe prepare their business for a sale to increase their own profit margins by replacing certain expenses, or to replace, if not themselves fully, by reducing the amount of weekly time spent that they have to operate the business, to make it less of a full-time job for a buyer that might be interested in the business. Do you think either of those avatars or descriptions fits kind of the content that you talk about?
Absolutely. I mean, if whether it's exactly like you said on the seller's end, where they're trying to reduce expenses and systemize processes to make it more plug and play and automated, then that's absolutely where tools come in to help facilitate that process. And definitely for the buyer as well, right? People looking to grow their businesses where, I find I saw a campaign by Fiverr the other day, brilliant campaign, by the way, but they were going hard at AI and automation tools because they realized that things that you used to pay 5, 10, 20, even a few $100s, like writing articles, are now automated. Like I'll give you a perfect example where I used to, from my YouTube videos, I used to have to pay freelancers to write blog posts for me because I just don't have the time. But now you can get AI agents to take your actual transcript of your YouTube video, so it's original content, not plagiarized from the internet, and turn that original content into another original piece of content in minutes. So absolutely, I would say that these are definitely the areas where the tools are coming in, where you're going to, like I always say, make more, spend less, work less.
Yeah.
Whether you're buying
definitely.
or selling.
Yeah, for sure. Well, awesome, Kevin. How can people, I know I alluded to your newsletter and your channel. How can people learn more about what you do and connect with you?
Yeah, for sure. So you can just follow me on youtube.com/solopreneur. I put out multiple tutorials, AI automation tutorials, and all kinds of tools to help you grow your business and even start a business. So just check out youtube.com/solopreneur. And you can go to solopreneurtools.io and check out my newsletter there as well. It's a free newsletter. I send it out every Friday. It's a 2-minute read, and I share one tool on how to make more, one tool on how to spend less, and one tool on how to work less every week, and along with my own musings on what I'm playing around with, and so that's I think it adds a lot of value in a little bit of time. So sign up for that for free as well.
Well, on that note, I think this is the perfect time to wrap this up. So thanks, Kevin. Really appreciate your time. And yeah, I highly recommend you all check out Kevin's channel and sign up for his newsletter. And thank you very much for joining this episode of Humans of Flippa, and we'll see you on the next one.